All right, good morning or afternoon or evening or middle of the night, LAPCS scholars. Mr. Rally here. Today we're going to be talking about the American Revolution Part 2. So obviously it's Part 2 of what you started yesterday. I am outside here in this rainy day. Luckily, I have a covered porch. Um, but I like being outside. So hopefully this will be clear sound wise for you. Um, so let's get started. So the American Revolution Part 2. The Battle of Saratoga. During the first 18 months of the war, Washington's demoralized or completely defeated troops lost in New York City and Philadelphia and then suffered through a bitter winter camped in Valley Forge. In July of 1777, a British force led by General Burgoyne began a military campaign designed to isolate New England from the Middle Atlantic colonies and cut the United States in two. The British felt that that would be a way to weaken the alliance between all of the colonies. American forces, led by Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold, or defeated the British plan by forcing Burgoyne to surrender 5,500 men at the Battle of Saratoga. I'm not going to talk very much about battles here because there's really only a couple of them that are super, super important for our purposes here. But there were many really interesting battles if you ever want to read up on them. The Battle of Saratoga marked a crucial turning point in the Revolutionary War. The victory revived the colonial cause and helped France to declare war with Great Britain and openly support the American cause. This was extremely important. Let's talk about the French alliance. So what happened? On February of 1778, France signed a treaty formally recognizing the United States. Before this, they were still just a bunch of colonies that were rebelling against the crown. But now a legitimate country has recognized the United States, and that's one of the criteria of becoming an independent country. The French and American alliance provided the United States with crucial diplomatic, financial, and military support, which we will get into more detail here momentarily. What caused the alliance? France was an absolute monarchy. So King Louis of France was not a fan of these Republican values. He didn't care about the Republican values. He had another motivation. Instead, France was motivated by a desire to regain its prestige in Europe by avenging its humiliating loss to Great Britain in the 7 Years' War. Remember, the French lost this massive war, the 7 Years' War, which is also known as the French and Indian War. Okay, remember in Europe it was called the 7 Years' War. In the Americas it was the French and Indian War. Fearful of an American defeat, the French initially followed a cautious approach toward rebellious colonies. They secretly provided vital military supplies, including badly needed ammunition and firearms. So they did not openly support the colonial cause. They didn't really want to make England mad if the colonials were going to prove to not be tough. But the Battle of Saratoga proved to the French that the colonials could hold their own against Britain. The skillful diplomacy of Benjamin Franklin captivated the court of Versailles, which is in France, and helped persuade the French to support the American cause. The American victory at Saratoga convinced the French leaders that America had the resolve to defeat Great Britain. They were very motivated, the Americans. So what should we remember about the French alliance? The French alliance prevented any chance of Anglo-American reconciliation. In other words, no chance that England and America were going to be friends, at least anytime soon. Nowadays, they're our biggest ally, actually. So that's, a couple hundred years can do that. French military and financial aid played a decisive or super important role in enabling America to win the Revolutionary War. For example, American forces received vital French help during the Battle of Yorktown. The Battle of Yorktown was the final battle of the war when basically the Americans were on one side, the English were in the middle, and then the French fleet in their ships, their navy, was on the other. So basically, the Battle of Yorktown, the British had to surrender because they were completely surrounded by the Americans on one side and the French on the other. So reasons why the Americans won the Revolutionary War. Well, there are lots of reasons. It's kind of complex, but they all work together. So there was no one main reason. So the first reason is simply the military reason. British commanders underestimated the fighting ability of American soldiers. They didn't think that the American soldiers could fight. The British were professional soldiers. That's all they did. That's what they did. But the Americans were mostly farmers and laborers who happened to be good with weapons. They also failed to implement a coordinated military strategy. So because the English did not coordinate their efforts with a military strategy that would be consistent, they were never going to be able to really pin down the colonials. Even though there were lots of battles that the British won and defeated the Americans, there was no, without a coordinated strategy, it wasn't a very effective way to try to win a war. America's vast size enabled its commanders to a defensive war, trading space for time. This was extremely important because since the American commanders knew the landscape, they used it really, really well. So there was a lot of strategy involved in that. Led by George Washington, America's military commanders proved to be resourceful and resilient. They were able to bounce back from adversity, and considering the fact that there were so many defeats to the British, that resiliency was extremely, extremely important. Diplomatic reasons. British government was confused, inept, and divided. For example, prominent Whigs, which were a political party basically, such as Edmund Burke and William Pitt, sympathized with the American cause. So the British government was not convinced that they should be fighting the Americans. A lot of them, quite a few of the people in Parliament, felt that the British should just go ahead and allow the Americans to have the representation that they wanted. But the Crown and leadership in Parliament said no. The French alliance proved indispensable provided indispensable military, financial, and diplomatic support. Absolutely. Without the French, the American Revolution would not have been won. Political reasons. The dispute with Great Britain over economic policies soon exposed irreconcilable political differences. Well, we've talked about those for the past couple of weeks. That's what Thomas Paine's pamphlets were for common sense, and also the Declaration of Independence. America lacked a monarchy or a hereditary aristocracy. So instead of fighting for the crown, American soldiers fought for republican ideals. Now, what are republican ideals? Do you remember? Remember, the consent of the governed. That's a republican ideal. John Adams later noted that the revolution was effected before the war commenced. The revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people. In other words, the Americans were fighting for something more. They had a lot more at stake than a bunch of soldiers that are professional and fighting for their crown. And really, they weren't getting anything out of it. The Americans would get freedom. The Treaty of Paris of 1783. Now, it's extremely important that you understand. You need to know these treaties of Paris because there's a whole bunch of them. So 1783, make sure you know the date. So the Franco-American alliance influenced Great Britain to offer generous peace terms. The Americans essentially got whatever they wanted. The treaty recognized the independence of the United States. So now the United States will be seen throughout the world as an independent country. The treaty recognized American sovereignty over territories extending from the Mississippi River on the west to the Great Lakes on the north and to Spanish Florida on the south. America pledged to compensate loyalists whose lands had been confiscated by state governments. So loyalists were people that still held allegiance to the crown, to the King of England. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I tried to keep it condensed so we can get through it pretty quickly. Make sure you complete your exit ticket and hand it in today. If you need any help, please come and see myself or Ms. Marks during Zoom hours between 8 and 10 and 12 to 2, and or email us. But you are to do what you did yesterday, create your outline notes, share them with me, and then complete the exit ticket. And that's it. All right, so that's the American Revolution. And then next time we're going to talk about what is this government going to look like. So, all right. Thank you. You have a good rest of your day.